We'll start with another Vipassana practice of emptiness. A classic approach, which we're going to look at in more detail shortly. A classic approach in Vipassana practice is to first investigate me, the person. How do I exist? Of course, in the Vipassana practice, we can investigate anything, the flowers, the laptop, the body, the mind, and so forth. But often it's very much recommended to start with investigating the me, the person, because it's this grasping onto the independent me that sort of starts the whole ball rolling. So we'll do a practice on that, and then after the practice I'd like to sort of discuss the components of this practice, what we're really doing in this practice. So if we've done it already, we can relate to the practice. So let's do the practice, and then we'll continue our discussions. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And with each out-breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Now, do you have a sense that there is a me here who is meditating? A me who is relaxing the body, and a me who's focusing the mind on the breath. A me that seems to exist from its own side and doesn't seem to depend upon anything else to exist. Do you have this experience of being the meditator? Can me, the meditator, be found anywhere? Can the me who is meditating be found anywhere within the body? So search thoroughly every part of the body and look for the me who is meditating. Is the meditator somewhere inside the head? Is the brain, is that the me who's meditating? Or is the brain simply something which I possess? Something which me, the meditator, is using? Is the whole body itself? Is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the whole body itself simply something which I have? Something which me, the meditator, is trying to relax? Can me, the meditator, be found anywhere in the mind? So again, search every part of the mind and look for the me who is meditating. Are any of the thoughts, emotions or concepts in the mind, are any of these the me who's meditating? Or are thoughts, emotions and concepts simply things which I have, things which me, the meditator, possesses? Is the whole mind itself? Is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the whole mind itself merely something which I have, something which me, the meditator, is using to focus on the breath. Is the combination of the body and mind, is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the combination of the body and the mind simply a collection of two things which I have? Two things which me, the meditator, is trying to train. Yet, other than the body and the mind, what else is there here? If there's nothing more than the body and the mind here, then where is the me that possesses this body and mind? Where is me that is training this body and mind? Where is me, the meditator? If you can't find the meditator, simply rest in the experience of not finding. Any questions about the practice? We're going to shortly lay out the steps in that practice to have clear what we were doing in that practice. So then before we do that, let's just review a few of the things we've covered so far today. So in all Buddhist traditions, the root cause of our mental afflictions and suffering is our distorted view of reality. But in the different Buddhist philosophical systems, what that root cause, what that distorted view is, looks a little bit different. In the Theravada Buddhist traditions, that distorted view is grasping to self, grasping onto this autonomous me that seems to be here. Whereas here, in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, particularly in what's called the Madhyamika philosophical system, what is identified as the most subtle distorted view is grasping onto independent me, independent world. And that's what we're looking at here today. And the assertion here is based on, the perfection of wisdom teachings from the Buddha, is there is no independent me, independent world. That in fact, nothing exists independently because everything is a dependent arising. Everything exists dependently. And so we had to look at what that means to be dependently existent. And we saw there that we can talk about dependently existent in three ways. Depending on causes and conditions, depending on parts, and depending on labelling or conception or designation. And we saw that at the most subtle level here, labelling really means that we are creating the world of our experience by drawing lines, creating objects, and giving a name. And one of the very first things we do in our experience is we tend to draw a line around here. We create the experiencer and thereby create the experienced. Now we need to draw lines and give names because otherwise there's no sense or meaning. But the problem is that we don't realise that's what we're doing, because it seems like the world is already divided up into many separate discrete things. So basically we turn our lines into boundaries. We see the world is already divided up into many separate discrete things. And there's an independent me here and an independent world there. And we saw that the problem with that, of course, is that leads to attachment to pleasant things, aversion to unpleasant things, because seeing or believing those things exist independent, it seems like the beauty or ugliness is coming from the object, and it seems like that object is a source of my happiness or suffering. So that attachment, aversion, and the whole mess starts from there. So therefore, we are to investigate this supposed reality. Is there really an independent world there? Is there really an independent me here? And in meditation, when we first come to establish that view of emptiness through reasoning and logic and investigation, in the meditation text often they use a physical phenomenon because it's easier. In fact, in Chandrakirti's classic text on the Middle Way, from the 6th century, he uses like a chariot or a cart, with wooden wheels and so forth. And he says, where is the chariot there? And then he proceeds to start pulling it apart and say, well, is this bit the chariot? Is this bit? Is this bit? Pulls it all apart and goes, where's the chariot? And then he starts assembling it. And we realise that the chariot is just something we create through conceptual framework. So by pulling it apart, we come to establish the view of emptiness to see there's no chariot to be found there. There's no chariot existing independent of our conceptual framework. But then when it comes to meditating, it's very much recommended that we start by focusing on me, the person. Because that's where the process starts to go wrong. We're grasping onto independent me, therefore grasping onto independent world. And there are a number of ways of investigating this me that seems to be here. And the one we did, the approach we did, was a sort of fairly classic approach that is probably one of the more easy ways of doing it as a beginner. So I'd just like to go through the steps of what we did so we sort of understand what we're doing in this practice. And this approach is usually presented with a presentation called the 4 essential points. And this is very well explained in a book from His Holiness Dalai Lama called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. And that's often the book I recommend for beginning to understand something about emptiness, because it talks about this ignorance, it talks about emptiness, dependent arising, it talks about these 4 essential points, and also there's little meditation exercises at the end of each section. How to see yourself as you really are. Is that in Hebrew?
Yes.
It is? Okay. So there are 4 steps, and the first step is the most important. And from His Holiness's book,